Foreign Relations Committee has held it for 20 plus years. We think it's a terrible pity. It's been hostage to Senator Speer. Let's ratify CEDAW. CEDAW. Our country should ratify right away. We're for CEDAW. It's good for the whole USA. We hope that the next time we gather, our victory will have been won, and the ratification of CEDAW will no longer remain to be done. Let's ratify CEDAW. CEDAW. Our country should ratify right away. We're for CEDAW. It's good for the whole USA. Hooray!
Hey. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cities for CEDAW 10th anniversary celebration. My name is Jessica Pearson, and I am the co-director of the Cities for CEDAW History and Futures project. And I'm joining you today from New York City, and I will be your co-moderator for today's event. And we have folks joining us today from all over the world, so we would love if everyone could introduce themselves in the chat and say where they're joining us from today. We're so good to see you all. So I'll now invite my co-moderator, Soon-Young Yoon, to introduce herself and tell you a bit about the music you just heard.
In fact, that music was recorded at a city council meeting written by the late Slater Newman. I just love that. You could say it's our theme song. Jessica, if somebody wanted to sing that song, where would they find the music?
Oh, you can find it. Well, you can watch the video on YouTube, and we will have we'll be sending around the sheet music following this event. So we got you covered.
Okay. Got it. So I'm Soon-Young Yoon. I'm the founder and co-director with Jessica of the Cities for CEDAW History and Futures project. So CEDAW, some of you like our veterans, some of you don't know what it is. CEDAW, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. And what is the purpose of our meeting today? We really need a cultural revolution for peace. And so one of the instruments we have is this Human Rights Treaty, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. So you're going to hear a lot about that. You'll hear about the campaign and even how you can participate. And also, it really has a wonderful history, which goes back 50 years to the 1975 UN Conference on Women in Mexico City, but particularly 1995 UN Fourth World Conference on Women. And next year, we are going to celebrate at the Commission on the Status of Women meeting in New York, the 30th anniversary. So we're calling it the Beijing+30. So all of this is on our program today, but really important is that you're going to be seeing wonderful cultural contributions by entertainers, professionals, but also ordinary citizens and youth. So Jessica, I hand it over to you. What is this culture of peace?
Yes, so I'd now like to introduce Ivy Koch, who is co-chair of the NGO Committee on the Status of Women New York and the UN representative for Soka Gakkai International, who will define for us what is a culture of peace. Ivy.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you, Soon-Young. I'm so happy to be here with you, and that NGO CSW New York is also co-sponsoring. Happy International Day of Peace today, everyone. So what's a culture of peace? First, I wanted to, in my role, especially in Soka Gakkai International, is that we really try to focus on the article A, culture of peace, like changing that to the culture of peace, because we feel that that really like gives it the importance that it deserves, because A seems a little half-hearted, and we do express the culture of war, so why can't we not have the culture of peace? So what is it? I wanted to first share that, in 1999, the UN General Assembly adopted the Declaration and Program of Action on a Culture of Peace. And the UN definition is that a culture of peace is a set of values, attitudes, traditions, and modes of behaviors and ways of life that reject violence and prevent conflicts by tackling their root causes to solve problems through dialogue and negotiation among individuals, groups, and nations. So that's their definition. And the program of action has 8 action areas. And one of them is to ensure equality between men and women. And there was something I wanted to share from who is called a matriarch of the 20th century peace research movement, who is Elise Boulding. And she said, war is not inherent in human beings. We learn war and we learn peace. The culture of peace is something which is learned, just as violence is learned, and war is also, war culture is also learned. And peace cultures thrive on and are nourished by visions of how things might be in a world where sharing and caring are part of the acceptive life ways for everyone. I think that is so super feminist. So I wanted to share that. And also wanted to note at the very end that the Beijing Platform for Action, actually one of the critical areas, which is on women in armed conflict, have a strategic objective, E4, which says promote women's contribution to fostering a culture of peace. So just wanted to alert everyone, if you weren't already aware, that culture of peace is a part of gender equality and women's empowerment. Intrinsically so, we need it. Can't have one without the other. So thank you again very much. I think I'm within 3 minutes. Okay.
But can I jump in here, Ivy?
Sure.
So what is this Beijing Platform for Action?
What is the Beijing Platform for Action?
Yes.
Oh, well, the Beijing Platform for Action was adopted in 1995 at the 4th World Conference of Women. It's also called, it's the most, up to now, is the most progressive blueprint for achieving gender equality globally. It's a roadmap, and this was, agreed by consensus by member states who attended the conference, which Sun Young did attend. So she could tell us the exact number of member states who signed that.
189, actually.
Okay, 180. And I think that was the official count of member states that were members of the UN at the time. Since then, it's grown. Of course, it's 193, I believe. Anyway, so anyway, is that a good, did you want me to explain more?
Perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ivy, and thank you to the NGO CSW New York for being a co-sponsor of today's event. And I love that we're talking about the culture of peace. That's right. So we'd now like to turn to a message from a youth advocate from the Global Network of Women Peace Builders.
And the Global Network is one of our co-sponsors, so this is great.
Real change occurs when the diverse voices of local women are not only heard, but actively shape decision-making processes within their communities through genuine participation. The Global Network of Women Peace Builders supports this through its localization of Bangladesh's National Action Plan on Women Peace and Security Initiatives, which empowers women and young women to fully engage in decision-making. This initiative contributes to the elimination of all forms of discrimination and violence against women, ensures support for women and girls in need, and fosters the inclusion of men as allies in the process. GNWP advocates for government, national, and local actors to elevate more women into leadership roles, amplify the voices of diverse women and young women, and support their efforts to build a just, inclusive, and sustainable peace.
And we thank the Global Network of Women Peace Builders for being a co-sponsor and Mavic Cabrera Beleza. So I'll now turn it back over to Soon Young, who will give us a sneak peek at a virtual Cities for CEDAW art gallery.
Yes, I'm inviting you into this virtual space for a view of how ordinary and very talented young women have expressed themselves through chairs. So let's imagine that we're going to enter the exhibit, which is what you're in line for tickets at this point. And here we go. Right over here. Let me get us there. Here we are. Okay, a seat at the table. What is the symbolism of this? UN Security Council resolutions call for women and youth and girls to participate in peace building and peacemaking with a seat at the negotiations table. What I love about this project from the Girls Hub Young Women of Toledo is the point is, if you don't find a seat at the table, make one. So their project has girls making their own chairs, expressing their hopes and dreams, expressing their love of life, and all of that is so important for the culture of peace. Sassy looking girl. And we find a lot of references to nature. The climate change issue is so much a part of what we have to pay attention to at the Summit of the Future. This particular person loved the ocean, so she had shells. And look at this one, loved the idea of astronauts, and maybe she wanted to be one. Flowers are a very wonderful way to imagine. And here I think is a snake. This one was about music. Rusty was one of the first women musicians in Toledo for jazz, and she really loved her music. So she expressed her devotion to Rusty this way. And take a look at this one. Let me show you who Carmen Wilson is. She's a 13-year-old who is a returning builder at Women of Toledo. And she says, this year, my chair is based on Gloria Steinem. Lots of people ask and want to know, who is Gloria Steinem? So I'm here to talk about her. Gloria Steinem was a journalist and feminist trailblazer who fought for men and women's equality. She also has created a magazine named Ms. Magazine. I think the colors were the colors. So she used blue, red, and yellow on this chair to pay tribute to Gloria. I'm going to show you a few more. I don't know if she dyed her hair to match the chair or if she made the chair to dye her hair, but it's beautiful as a combo. And here was one of the younger ones. Effie, age 8, also decided to contribute this wonderful tribute to the ocean, where she often does surfing. And this virtual gallery is just an example of where we can put your artwork if you decide to join us for some of the activities that we want to put forward that you can join. You can apply to contribute your artwork to the Beijing+30 process. Beijing+30, as I said, it's going to happen in March, so there's plenty of time to do this. Jessica, am I continuing over to my presentation? And you're going to help me get there?
That's right. And we'll be sending around the form where you can apply to have your artwork shown in the Cities for CEDAW art gallery following this event. And I just love that idea of, you know, you want a seat at the table, build your own chair. And these young women are so inspiring. So yes, at this point, you might be wondering, what is Cities for CEDAW? Well, Soon Young is going to give us an overview of this historic campaign.
Right. So this is what it looks like in a graph. Later, we're going to see what it looks like in person. 1998, an amazing time when a coalition in San Francisco, who are partly with us today, decided after the UN Fourth World Conference on Women that they needed to bring global to local. In 1998, San Francisco adopted CEDAW as a legally binding city ordinance. And a number of jurisdictions, as we call them, cities and states, followed suit and did some activity. Then in 2014, the NGO Committee on the Status of Women, who we will also hear from later, also decided that to commemorate 20 years after this historic 1995 UN conference, they would ask the then Mayor Lee of San Francisco to be the peer leader for the United States in order to launch a campaign called Cities for CEDAW. And he introduced CEDAW into the US Conference of Mayors. And they adopted a CEDAW resolution, 200 of them. The wonderful gathering of international women's organizations at this Commission on the Status of Women meeting then went home. And look what happened. 2015, 2016, amazing activity took place in the United States, and it continues today. The reason I kept this source on the lower left is I want to credit Sarah Kamiko Ernst for this diagram. And I want to invite any students who are online with us today to consider doing research and joining our history project. What does it look like today? On your very left, take a look at that. The high is not high, it's Hawaii. So all the counties in Hawaii now have legally binding CEDAW ordinances. Extraordinary. They are currently in resolutions or in ordinances in nearly 65 cities, counties, and states. I think the largest one may be LA County, who we'll hear from later. And the smallest one, and one of the most important one, is in Granville, Ohio. I think their population is like 1,400, and it's so important that it reach even the smallest places. It covers now over 80 million Americans. So the issues that are brought up here include all the issues of what Ivy was talking about in the Beijing Platform for Action. So if the Beijing Platform for Action is a policy guide agreed upon from global consensus, CEDAW is the legal roadmap. So you take the policy guide in one hand and you work it out on the other hand with law. And so laws about discrimination, laws about equal education, laws about violence against women, and so on. So when we measure those laws and their impact, we refer to substantive equality. It's not enough to have the laws in place. We really need to be able to show that it's having an impact. We talk about standout successes. There are many, but let me just share one of them, San Francisco. They had wonderful results immediately afterwards with no domestic violence related homicides. It was the first municipality to provide 12 weeks of 100% paid parental leave to city male and female employees with flexible workplace. And one of the things that we see in this campaign is that cities and counties and states can look immediately internally. What's the gender balance on the city commissions that they can actually immediately try to put in place, their boards, or try to have greater accountability in their financing in different departments. The other one that we'll hear from today is Los Angeles City. When Mayor Garcetti was mayor of Los Angeles, he sent us this wonderful video, which you can find online. And he invited the heads of department of his city to his personal residence. And he told them, he did this mayoral declaration or a decree, which was very unusual at the time, telling them that he wanted accountability from them on implementation of CEDAW in all of their departments. That shapes a political culture, which is really important. And then we have LA County. And we find, and I'm not going to tell you any more about that because we've got Chanel and Caroline to talk to us about that later. So political culture, that is so important because the laws are really just standards. If you don't know about them, they have no effect. And then ultimately, if they don't become part of the way you make your decisions and the way you look at other people, that means nothing. So we need to become CEDAW in some ways. We need to be able to take law and have it help us deal with our society and the people around us. So how to change political culture? We need public education, coalition building, but we need it before we have an ordinance or resolution, because that is when the public education and consciousness is raised. We find that, interestingly enough, the majority of city councils that passed CEDAW were engaged with men. And the reason I think that's partly important is because the feminist movement and our cause has now gone into the seats of power. That includes not only in the cities and counties and states or nationally, because CEDAW is on the current administration's list of important things to be paid attention to, but also within the UN itself, we have many partners and many allies. So here's exciting news. To your left is Pam. On that picture is Pam Morgan, who is co-chair of the NGO Committee on the Status of Women. Next to her is Council Member Robert White and Karen Mulhauser and Jillian. They were together presenting a CEDAW Leadership Award to Mayor Bowser and to Robert White because Washington, D.C. now has a CEDAW ordinance. There you see, next to me, you see Bandana Rana, who is a CEDAW expert, and the CEDAW expert from Nigeria. Why are they important? They are the 23 members of a committee called the CEDAW Committee, and they are elected to their offices through the UN, and they are responsible for interpreting, but also holding accountable the governments who have ratified CEDAW. 189 countries have done that. And they depend on you. They depend on the feminist and women's movement in their countries to be able to actually implement and make this a reality. So thank you very much. I love talking about this topic.
Thank you, Soon-Young.
I hand it back over to you, Jessica.
Thank you. So the Cities for CEDAW now includes 22 counties. So not just cities, counties and states. But now we're going to focus on counties. And I will invite Carolyn Turin, who is the founder of Refolda, and Chanel Smith, who is the former CEO of the Women and Girls Initiative and currently in the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health, to speak about the innovative work they have done in Los Angeles County to implement their CEDAW ordinance. So Chanel, I'll start with you. How have you used CEDAW to improve the health of women and girls, including ending gender-based violence in LA County?
Well, thank you so much for having us, Jessica and Soon-Young, and to all of the women who have spoke already and the amazing work that you guys have done over the past decades. We're just in awe and so honored to be able to be a part of this. So my name is Chanel Smith. I am the former executive director for the Women and Girls Initiative with Los Angeles County. The entire initiative started in 2016, and we actually sunset. Oh, sorry. We actually sunset in June of this year. So it was important for our Board of Supervisors to institutionalize the work for gender equity within all 39 of our county departments. So we were originally tasked with looking at the county as an employer, as a service provider, and as a partner through our contracting. And I know Caroline will talk a bit more about our gender impact assessment and kind of our the big project that we did to kind of launch CEDAW in LA County. But specifically to answer your question, Jessica, when it comes to women's health, as we mentioned, gender equity is something that really should not sit outside of our government institutions. And so it was really important for us to work with all of our county departments that are operating in the space of women's health, including gender-based violence. So our public health departments, our health services departments, our economic security departments, our law enforcement partners, working with our court systems and kind of looking at that entire continuum of care as it relates to when somebody is exposed to violence, in particular a woman, and like what that does to her, what it does to her family, and what it does to her community. So we have a pretty robust shelter system in Los Angeles County. During the time of WGI, we were able to support our shelter system in increasing their funding by an additional $3.2 million. Small amount of money when we're talking about kind of overall budgets, but it was really huge. Like Soon Young was saying, kind of how embodying CEDAW and really making sure that our governmental entities are invested in it. The source of funding that this 3.2 million came out of what's called our county NCC funds. And it was the first time in LA County's history that they had dedicated actual county dollars, like county tax dollars, to go to the shelter system, instead of kind of pass-throughs that we typically get from our state and federal funding, which, as we all know, can be a bit more volatile. So it creates stability for the system. That was something that we were incredibly proud of. And then subsequent to that, our board said, you know, we really should be looking upstream and looking at gender-based violence prevention. And so we recently launched the first gender-based violence prevention program in the county. They are in the process of hiring for that. But another couple of $1 million was dedicated for that program. And then in addition to overall gender-based violence prevention work, we started the Sexual Assault Council, and another couple of $1 million was actually dedicated so that people who are experiencing sexual assault can have specialized care. As we know, gender-based violence is kind of a Venn diagram. We've got domestic violence, we've got human trafficking, we've got sexual assault, we've got some hate crimes that happen. And oftentimes they're a sort of Venn diagram, but it takes specialized skills to be able to work with those individualized populations. And our board recognized that and wanted to dedicate funding not only to the entire system as a whole, but to each of those specialty areas to make sure that the people who live in LA County are getting the support that they need when it is that they need it. So.
Thank you. That's such important work you're doing. And Carolyn, my question for you is if you can just tell us about the special role that counties can play in the Cities for CEDAW campaign.
Thank you, Jessica. It's really good to be here. Thank you all for putting this on. And I've seen so many familiar names in the chat. Hi, Gail. Hi, Parisa. It's good to have so many experts in the room. Jessica, I think Chanel's response really kind of laid out the landscape in terms of what an important role counties and cities play. Los Angeles County is, of course, a proud member of the Cities for CEDAW campaign, but they are closer to the communities, closer to the people, right? And they are the ones providing these critical services and programs. And so, of course, it's vital that they introduce tools like gender assessments, tools like gender-based budgeting, tools like gender-based action plans to really transform the culture within the departments to ensure that policies and programs are gender responsive. As you heard from Chanel, LA County is really taking on kind of both a targeted approach as well as a countywide approach. So we have specific targeted initiatives that are focusing on priority issues like gender-based violence, while at the same time, we're trying to bring all county departments on board with us. And so the Gender Impact Assessment Program was I think, 3-year program development and implementation where we tried to really set up departments for success. We provided them with a curriculum, with training. We were really holding their hands, working with them on a 3-month basis to train them in gender assessments and help them identify critical gender gaps, as well as goals and strategies and metrics to address those gaps. So we were focusing in this kind of first effort on 3 areas, and that was services, external services, workforce, and leadership, as well as family-friendly policies and practices that is, of course, well connected to the workforce and leadership portion. And so we're proud that as of today, all county departments, they have their own kind of GIA dashboard, as we call it, that lays out their goals and their strategies and metrics. And I know, Soon Young, you want me to touch upon accountability. So I'll just say a few words about that. Chanel is really the brain behind all of this, but what we were able to do is, it was important for us for this initiative and gender equity to not be sidelined or addressed in silo. And so the departments are reporting on their goals and strategies on an annual basis. And this reporting process is integrated in the existing countywide reporting process. So they are doing this while at the same time they're reporting on some other board priorities. And their heads of departments compensation is tied to the performance of their goals and their strategies. And so this was really critical for us. Another thing that has been vital for us to create this environment of collective accountability is for departments to share their experiences, their lessons learned, their challenges, but their solutions too with one another. So that was a critical component to our program. I will stop there, and Sun Young and Jessica, if we missed anything critical, you let us know.
No, this is a great overview of the amazing work you're doing there. And I remember when we interviewed you for our project, you mentioned that there are 150,000 county employees whose work you're doing is changing their lives, and that 11 million people live in LA County. So your work has this broad reach, which is just incredible.
Yeah, and if I can jump jump in, I want to know who paid for this. Chanel?
Oh, yep, sorry, of course, it took
Did
a
you
while
have
to
the
get my
budget?
audio.
Like, how much
Yeah.
did it cost and who paid for it?
That's a great question. So our WGI's annual operating budget was 1.7 million. As we said, we started in 2016 and we sunset in 2024, sorry, June of this year. And so the county, that came out of our county dollars. It was really important for our board of supervisors to say, like, we want, as Caroline mentioned, to set our departments up for success. They gave us a tremendous amount of autonomy in kind of how it is that we did that. And so we utilized the gender impact assessment. Ours, our implementation mechanism for CEDAW, for our CEDAW ordinance in LA County, but the county paid for this. So they were able to contract Caroline Rafolda to be able to do this amazing work. And I am also very excited to say, hot off the presses, Caroline will be able to continue to work with the county to really make sure that we don't lose momentum for the next 5 years. So those goals that she talked about that are attached to the performance evaluation of all of our department heads, the board passed recently a motion that said that this will continue to be a 5-year goal and that we will continue as a county to invest in subject matter experts like Caroline to be able to continue to support this work.
So I should say that the reason I hesitated mentioning Caroline's work is she's actually Swedish. So I don't know if to call her Caroline or Caroline. So I was saying, which one am I going to say? But the two of you are amazing. And you brought us down to the ground. Do you have things you think you can offer the other counties? The other 21?
Yeah, I'll start and then I'll pass it over to Caroline because I know she's got a million ideas too. I would say, like, to begin with, don't try to boil the ocean, right? Counties, there's a lot. We're very complex bureaucracies, as I'm sure all of you who are on here know. And so looking at kind of what are the priorities in your county, what is the political will that you do have, and kind of where can you make some inroads, and then growing from there. So you don't have to be able to tackle all of CEDAW at one time. It really does encompass the full scope of a woman's life. But is there something that you all can do? So being able to really look at, like, what are the priority areas, again, for your county in particular? The gender impact assessment was an amazing way for us to be able to lay that groundwork. And then, as Caroline said, now we can sort of focus on each department and the work that they're doing, and how can we work through kind of all of these individual areas to really impact women's lives on a more granular level. But for us, it made sense to look at a more macro, like broader level, let's train and capacity building. And I will pass it over to Caroline because, again, I'm sure she has some other amazing ideas.
Thank you, Chanel. I would say you've heard this before, but don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. As several of you here are experts, you're working on this. When you look at LA County's board motions and other templates, you may have some questions. Our templates or motions are far from your ideal example, but they were just good enough for us to do the real work. They provided us enough flexibility and, as Chanel mentioned, the autonomy to kind of develop this and implement it in a way that we thought would be truly successful. And then another best practice or just food for thought that worked for us was, we know there's a global gender data gap. Counties and cities play a critical role in addressing that. We know local jurisdictions want to be modern, innovative. They want to make decisions based on data. And so you can use the narrative and the hype around data to leverage your efforts and to have that as a starting point. That was really where we started. It was an inventory about what data did our county departments collect and where could we fill the gaps.
And do you have a report you can share with everyone afterwards?
We do.
I know you do. Continue to spread it. Wonderful. Okay, so Jessica, should we move on here?
Yes, thank you so much to Carolyn Torin and Chanel Smith for sharing this incredible work and for being a peer leader for other counties who are passing or implementing their CEDAW ordinances. And as I mentioned, we interviewed Chanel and Caroline in depth about their work, and that is on our YouTube channel. So we can send that around after the event too, if you'd like to learn more. So now we'll move on to talking about the importance of academia in the Cities for CEDAW campaign. And there have been 6 law schools that have supported the campaign throughout the country in California, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, for example. And I'd like to now welcome 2 law students from the Santa Clara Law School International Human Rights Clinic, who will talk about why human rights is important for a culture of peace. So please welcome Denise Vera Romo and Leah Kreis. I'll turn it over to you two.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. Good morning. My name is Leah Kreis, and I, alongside my team member, Denise Vera Romo, are here as law students on behalf of the International Human Rights Clinic at Santa Clara University School of Law. We would like to thank the leadership of Cities for CEDAW History and Futures Project for organizing this virtual conference and for allowing us to speak today. The Santa Clara International Human Rights Clinic has made significant strides in advancing women's human rights law through various impactful initiatives. In October of 2023, we submitted a response to the UN Call for Inputs, which is an official process inviting expert feedback on topics essential for shaping global human rights policies. Our submission focused on how local governments can integrate women's human rights into their frameworks and the potential role that the UN could have in offering resources and strategies for best practices. Law school clinics across the country are actively supporting local jurisdictions in adopting and implementing CEDAW ordinances, which is helping to fill the gap left by the US not ratifying the treaty and promoting gender equity at the local level. Our submission specifically highlighted the actions of local city and county governments in California, which have been pivotal in advancing gender equity. The report has allowed others to learn about steps taken throughout California to further the protection of the rights of women and girls. Notably, Santa Clara County, with the support of the Santa Clara International Human Rights Clinic, adopted a CEDAW ordinance in May of 2023. And this ordinance mandates the incorporation of gender equity principles into county operations. It specifically focuses on the following 9 areas of priority for the county: housing and homelessness, economic development, education and women's leadership, the criminal justice system, political and civic engagement, gender-based violence and harassment, healthcare, environmental justice and climate change, and transportation, library, and environmental health services. Similarly, we've been working with the city of San Jose to create an implementation strategy for their Women's Bill of Rights, which also seeks to promote equity. In appreciation for the International Human Rights Clinic's work to promote the implementation of CEDAW principles locally, the clinic received a Congressional Recognition Award from all of the congressional representatives from Santa Clara County in California. This years-long effort represents Santa Clara University's long-term commitment to implementing women's rights at the local level. My colleague Denise will speak on the future work the International Human Rights Clinic at Santa Clara University will do to advance women's human rights law and to promote a culture of peace.
Hello, thank you so much for having us today. My name is Denise Vera Romo. Looking forward, our goal for the International Human Rights Clinic at Santa Clara is to continue advancing women's rights and promoting a culture of peace. Currently, local jurisdictions need concrete guidance to translate the substance of CEDAW and the general recommendations of the CEDAW Committee into local law and policy. In the coming months, our main project will involve creating a comprehensive synthesis of jurisprudence from the CEDAW Committee, including its general recommendations, and translating that into actionable guidance for CEDAW jurisdictions in the U.S. We also aim to present our findings at a meeting of the Santa Clara County Commission on the Status of Women, using accessible language to facilitate local government implementation. Our focus will be on intersectionality, targeting local officials to drive meaningful change for women and girls while supporting advocates on the ground. I believe that our work to implement CEDAW locally is vital to fostering a culture of peace, as human rights law establishes the norms for how individuals should be treated, particularly in addressing the long-standing effects of laws and cultures that have historically viewed women as subhuman. Additionally, laws that protect women's rights are essential to ensuring that women can seek redress for the violations they've experienced and for reforming institutions to proactively safeguard those rights. Finally, raising awareness and educating people about their rights and responsibilities is fundamental to reconciliation and critical for sustaining long-term peace. In essence, the local implementation of CEDAW is essential for promoting and establishing equity and fairness for all. We look forward to continuing a partnership with Cities for CEDAW in our role as peer leader for CEDAW law schools. If you'd like to learn more about our work, please visit www.law.secu.edu/IHRC. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I don't know if you had any follow-up questions, Soon Young, before we move on.
Yeah, I think you need to explain two things. What in the world is a general recommendation from CEDAW, and what in the world is intersectionality?
Yes, of
Well,
course.
You take it, Denise.
General recommendations are just the general statistics that have been brought up by CEDAW reports, and it gives like a general direction of what has actually worked locally and what has worked substantially for women and girls. And intersectionality, Leah, would you like to take that one?
Well, I guess broadly speaking, intersectionality plays into how women are perceived in society and how this, I guess I'm trying to phrase this correctly. Intersectionality has a broad, it encompasses how women are presented throughout society and how the discriminatory effects can play a strong role in the way that these women and girls grow up into society, not having the resources that they need to be able to become leaders within this community.
Yeah, and if I could piggyback off Leah's response, it also looks at it from a lens of women of color and also women that have also experienced stuff like poverty. And I know Leah's working closely with the housing process and the housing project for women. So we want to also look at those issues as well.
And if there are other students on this call, can you just say, like, again, why it's important for, or why it would be important to research this topic?
That question, I hope it's not for me. Is that for me, Jessica?
No, that's for Leah or Denise. Like, why is it important for students to want to research implementing human rights principles locally, especially in the US?
Well, I think that as Denise mentioned, it is important because we are the future and we have especially women of color, they've made significant strides. Understanding what's going on in this space will allow for future generations to be able to really see the work that they've been able to create and will be able to actually have more of a voice within these communities. And so understanding this from the get-go when we're in school allows us to be able to understand the structures that are in place, and then as we get older, how we can be a part of it and dismantle it, build it up, figure out how we can actually make actionable change.
That's a great answer, and I feel super inspired by that, and I hope that the other students and young people on the call with us today also feel that way, because we need you. We need you in this fight. So anything else before we move on, Sun Young?
No, I'd like to pick up from here. We have law. We have the engagement of many law schools who have helped support the campaign. We know that the campaign has faced opposition. Anyone in this call who has tried to work on it has faced arguments that this thing is irrelevant to us locally. I mean, what does the UN have to do with my life? You know, it's trying to take over our legal agenda. Why should we pay attention to international law, etc.? And the next thing that we're going to show you is a wonderful example of a lawyer, Jill Follows, who actually wrote a dramatic presentation of this argument. She put it under the CEDAW trilogy. If you Google that under YouTube or search it, you will find a whole trilogy. And this is just a clip, a segment. I think that we can share it with you. Let's try.
While Sun Young's getting that up, I'll just thank Denise and Leah again for their presentation, and just a huge thanks to Santa Clara Law School International Human Rights Clinic for being a peer leader for Cities for CEDAW. All right,
The session will come to order. We will begin with the proposed CEDAW resolution. After some opening remarks from our petitioner, I will ask each supervisor if they want to add a statement to the record. At this time, I yield the floor to Ms. Arnold. Ms. Arnold is the representative of the coalition of community organizations that have brought this proposal to us today. Ms. Arnold, you have the floor.
Remember, this isn't really Ms. Arnold.
Thank you, Chairman Irwin. CEDAW is an acronym for the United Nations Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. CEDAW is an international human rights treaty focused on gender equity and the empowerment of women and girls. It was adopted by the UN General Assembly in 1979. This resolution is important for so many reasons. CEDAW promotes studies in gender equity. A gender study will gather and analyze information on the effects of discrimination on women, on their healthcare, safety, employment, housing, transportation, and homelessness. And that is just to name one advantage. Our coalition believes that respect for the human person begins at home, in our own community. We support all appropriate measures that seek to end discrimination against women. By adopting a CEDAW resolution today, our municipality would join other cities and counties across the nation, affirming fundamental human rights. A CEDAW resolution can have real impact, and San Francisco is a shining example. After adopting CEDAW, the city and county saw 44 months free from domestic violence-related homicides and an increase in women-owned small businesses. The San Francisco mayor established a task force on anti-human trafficking, and the gender analysis revealed the county's need to reflect gender diversity in its commissions and its boards. Other examples abound. In Los Angeles, a CEDAW ordinance led to a public library program to expose young women to math and science, and a 12-fold increase in public funding of contracts awarded annually to certified women-owned businesses. Our coalition believes that you will be applauded for your endorsement of this resolution and rewarded with our votes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Arnold. All of our supervisors have reviewed the resolution before us today. And now, Supervisor August, would you like to add a statement to the record?
So I'm going to stop it here for a moment because we can fast forward to a counter argument, which is presented, I do believe, by the author of this wonderful drama. Let's see if we can find her.
This resolution puts another layer of redundancy on an already overburdened government system. We have protections for women already on the books. This resolution changes the definition of women to include biological men. It's an effort to cement the idea that transgender individuals are women. If we follow this new definition to its logical conclusion, then anyone identifying as a woman will be able to mix with real women and girls in locker rooms, in their schools, in domestic violence centers, in homeless shelters. Biological men will compete with women unfairly in sports and take scholarships away from real women. I believe we need to draw the line somewhere. I cannot support this resolution until we resolve this issue. I vote no, and I yield back my time.
So that's to show you it wasn't an easy journey for many of the people who are working in this campaign, many of whom are with us today. So Jessica, what's next? Am I supposed to do something?
No, thank you for showing that clip. As you mentioned, it's part of a longer trilogy written by Jill Follows that's also on YouTube, and we can send around the clip to watch that in its entirety. And I just wanted to point out that the part of Ms. Arnold was played by no other than Ashley Ravichet, who is president of the United Nations Association San Francisco, USA San Francisco, and leads the Ratify movement in the US. So yes, now Soon Young will introduce our next special guest.
Yes, we have with us Krishanti Demaraj, who's going to come on camera here in a minute. Where are you, Krishanti? There you are. Krishanti is the founder and CEO of the Dignity Index. She's former director of the Center for Women's Global Leadership at Rutgers University. But for the most important part of this history, Krishanti was at the 1995 UN Fourth World Conference on Women, and she's going to tell us what happened there to her that spurred her to do something else, which was in San Francisco. Krishanti, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It is wonderful to be among all of you, and it's a privilege. So we're talking about a culture of peace. A culture of peace, especially for me. I was born and raised for the first 16 years of my life in Sri Lanka. When you come from war, a culture of peace is your oxygen, okay? It is not a story that you read in a book, right? It is your living life that you have to figure out how to live in peace and ensure that you are safe. So in that context, I was working for Amnesty International when I went to the Fourth World Conference, which was extraordinary. I'd never been among, I don't know, 35,000 plus women in all.
Crazy women, men, boys, they were all there.
Yes. I'm going to focus on women right now. I live among men all the time, right? I had never been in that space, right? And from the US, we did not have an agenda going into that World Conference as a collective, okay? Most other countries had national agendas. So for a few of us who were there, it meant that when we came back, we had to figure out if there was another world conference in whatever capacity, we were ready to take a national agenda forward, right? I'm a human rights person, so it was really important for those of us who came together actually on the Great Wall when we shook hands to bring human rights home, what it meant, what we would come back to the US and figure out not only how to bring Beijing, but how to ensure women's human rights within the United States through the leadership of women who were incredibly diverse. And CEDAW was the answer.
Perfect. So then what happened?
It's a fine line between being brave and stupid.
So yeah, talk about your experience in San Francisco in coalition building when you I know that you realized that there was not going to be ratification happening right away, and you wanted to do something there. So how do you build coalitions like that?
So I want to just take a snapshot of the United States in 1995, 1996. It was exciting because there were so many women who went from the US, particularly from California, to the World Conference. And then First Lady Hillary Clinton had said women's rights are human rights. So all the work we had done that did not get play as women's rights and human rights suddenly came to life. And there was more excitement. So I want to connect the work of CEDAW to a culture of peace. There are three elements to me in a culture of peace: caring, right? Safety, right? And governance, right? And CEDAW allows for all of it. It's now that I have come to put these things together. But when I returned, right, it was about figuring out how do we make human rights viable and real in the United States. While the government of the US at that time was in favor of ratifying CEDAW, we knew that we didn't have 67 votes in the Senate is what is needed to ratify an international treaty. We didn't have that. I came back from a meeting in Washington, D.C., really kind of sad that we didn't have 67 votes. On that flight back, I felt like we had to do something in order to show that CEDAW cannot go unrecognized and that women's human rights has to take root in the United States, right? And as a result of that sad flight was really to figure out what it might mean to bring a coalition together in San Francisco. So I want to say that San Francisco was perfectly situated in these three areas. There was care in it that there was a community of women, right, who were willing to engage in mobilizing, who thought this crazy idea of passing an international treaty at the local level was not that far-fetched, right? So I wanted to really say that at that time, the chair of the Commission on the Status of Women, Patty Chang, and the director of Amnesty International, Dr. Cosette Thompson, supported this idea that most women actually who were kind said, you're crazy, right? So having people who believe and trust you matters, and the coalition was built that way. And I think it's really important to recognize in coalition building, it is about collective power. It is not the individual. An individual can have an idea. You need collective power, women's power to move it forward.
So did you build it out also with young people?
Yes. Yeah, we brought in, it was a very, while the three of us came together to conceptualize from the first day onwards, we had young women being part of it, because Wild for Human Rights, the Women's Institute for Leadership Development, that spearheaded this work in San Francisco, had a young women's program coming out of Beijing. Right? We had set up a program for girls between the ages of 18, young women between the ages of 18 to 22. So they were at the table from day one.
And don't you need the collaboration or the partnership with people inside the city to make this
Yes.
happen? Like, how do you develop that? How did you develop that?
I think there are a couple of things. One is I said there has to be care, there has to be safety, there has to be governance, right? So I want to talk about now bringing in the governance piece. San Francisco was beautifully set up at that time because we had majority of women in city council, as you might say, and but in San Francisco, we call the board of supervisors. Majority of the elected officials were women. We also had elected officials. That meant 2 women senators, right? Many in Congress, and the head of the president of the community college was also a woman. So there was this sea of change. Didn't mean that everyone agreed and were progressive, but the fact that we had that many women, diverse voices, supported that governance. Women in governance matters. We have to be 50%. There is no 10% nonsense. I mean, let's learn from the United Arab Emirates. They have 50% in office, elected and appointed. We are behind times, right?
We are definitely underdeveloped. And what about the mayor, the mayor?
So, yeah. So I think there were the Commission on the Status of Women. They weren't a department at that time. And Patty Chang was the president of that commission, who was also the executive director of the Women's Foundation of California, right? So she had this dual role of being a public citizen within the city premises, right? So we worked with the city Commission on the Status of Women and the Human Rights Commission and every city council member. We met with them. We explained what we wanted to do. We wanted to make sure that we had a gender analysis in service delivery, in employment, which included hiring, pay, equity, retention, and promotion and appointments. And we wanted a gender analysis in the budget. And I tell everyone who is trying to pass CEDAW in the United States, don't give up on analyzing the budget. The budget tells the story of the life of the women of that city or county.
Exactly. And you still haven't told us about the mayor. Was Gavin Newsom mayor at that time?
No, actually, it was Mayor Brown.
Brown, but didn't Gavin Newsom get in there somehow?
No, he was actually not in office at that time, but he did something very important. As soon as he became a city council member, which is a board of supervisors, I think it was in 1998 or so by that time. 1988 we passed, but this work started fall of 1996. We took 18 months to do this right. And at the moment, the current governor, then board of supervisors got in, there were budget cuts. There were federal budget cuts that impacted the city. And using CEDAW, he helped the Commission on the Status of Women to pass a resolution saying that any budget cuts that were going to happen in the city must have a gender analysis.
Perfect.
And if we wouldn't have had that if the ordinance didn't ask for it.
Exactly. I think he is a lawyer, so I understand well. Krishanti, I want to move to a resource that we've worked on. And this is it. A resource that would do the ABC on how you start something like this in whatever country you are in whatever jurisdiction you are in. Do you want to talk a little bit about why you find this handbook? Who is it for?
First of all, I have to say that this book would not be around if not for Sun Yan Yoon. She's the power behind this. Yes, we wrote it together, but without her, this would not be there. So thank you, Sun Yan. This is for anyone who actually, for a moment, I want you to hold the idea of CEDAW aside. I want you to think about do you want to live in a place where that you can thrive, right? And if you want to make your community, even a school or a neighborhood, thrive, and going beyond surviving to thriving, then I think you can utilize this workbook, right? So it is not for cities alone. Cities are one aspect of really using how to change governance, because governance is very critical and women in politics is important, right? I don't think we can undermine that, right? So I think it is for anyone who believes in living well, and that well-being, right, is central to your community. That includes human and environment, right? And this day and age, we can't give up. So it's for anyone who really wants to make change, as small or as big as you want.
Exactly. So I at least want to give everyone a glimpse of what the chapters look like, and then we'll close the session. But here it is. There's a chapter on building your coalition, working towards change, the relevance of human rights, which was Krishanti's main point there. On government, there's a section on how governments can also use this handbook if they want to reference, right, Krishanti?
Yes, thanks.
Yeah. And then, of course, connecting the local to the global. So that is available on Amazon.com. It's not to sell a book, but to let you know where it is. So Jessica, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Sorry, may I give you one thing, please? I just want to say, no. I wanted to say, especially, I know that the audience is large. It's international. I've seen folks from India, Kenya, etc. Thank you for being with us. We are behind. We are the only industrialized nation not to ratify CEDAW, right? This is why we started doing this work on the ground, and it has a life of its own. One of the most important things about CEDAW, especially for those of us in the US, is that CEDAW speaks to what is called substantive equality. It is the equality of results. That means that it includes both equity and equality. This is critical at a time when there are attacks on diversity, equity, inclusion, that we can utilize CEDAW in a way that really looks at the equality of results. That means that you must have equity as well as equality in order to advance the rights of women. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Krishanti. It's always good to hear your wisdom as the pioneer of this movement. So thank you so much for being with us today. And I'd now like to invite the Cities for CEDAW cultural advisors to talk about how culture makers can contribute to building a culture of peace. So please welcome Pamela Morgan, who is co-chair of the NGO Committee on the Status of Women New York, Michaela Jamelska, technologist and human rights advocate, and Alahi Amani, president of the Women's Intercultural Network. So thank you. I have two starting questions, and then I'll just invite you to have a discussion. So to get this kicked off, I would love to know, what is your personal commitment to a culture of peace? And what have you done to contribute to this cause? And then more broadly, what do you think artists and writers can do to promote a culture of peace? So maybe we'll start with Michaela.
Thank you, Jessica, very much for this introduction. I'm glad to be here with you all today, and thank you, Sun-Young, also for having me. So my name is Michaela, as Jessica mentioned, and I'm a human rights advocate specializing in AI, working with human rights organization, particularly on issues with technology in consulting capacity. I'm also a PhD researcher specializing in AI and human rights, and I spent 10 years working on large technology projects around the world. And so today we spoke a lot about CEDAW and a culture of peace, mainly when it comes to physical spaces and cities. However, in my short presentation, I would like to take you on a short exploration of the digital world where we are currently sitting and discussing CEDAW. I will talk high level because we have a limited time, so no specifics right now. So as we all work towards upholding the principles of CEDAW in the physical spaces, it is equally important, and especially in my mission, as you asked, Jessica, to promote a culture of peace in a digital world. What we are seeing right now is increasing level of online violence, especially verbal violence, when it comes to, for example, social media platforms, particularly gender-based harassment, abuse, or discrimination. This violence that happens in an online or a digital world very often manifests itself in various forms, whether that is a cyberbullying, doxing, algorithmic biases that eventually harm women and marginalized groups around the world. And we know that technology mirrors societal structures that are out there and can actually amplify existing inequalities. So by aligning our technological advancement with the CEDAW's values, I really believe that we can create more inclusive and equitable digital future for all. In my research that I'm pursuing, I'm creating a framework where technology companies can actually use principles of a CEDAW and other human rights legislation and regulations that are out there and implement them not only into deployment of those technologies, but also into development and design. I really believe that digital platforms increasingly shape the decisions about hiring, healthcare, finance, or social engagement, and we need to really ensure that they are built and governed in a way that protect and advance women's rights particularly. We need local and global cooperation when it comes to creating that governance. And I think the principles of CEDAW are a great starting point for our society to lead a responsible and inclusive digital transformation of our society. There are a couple of challenges that I could raise, like a gender bias in AI, access to technology. Some women and marginalized groups, they don't have the same access or data representations. We talked about data previously. So there's a lot of data sets that don't really represent all groups, mainly women, when the technologies are developed. And all the principles of a CEDAW really apply into those online territories or workplace inequality or jobs displacement. A lot of those AI or technology companies, they're going wipe away mainly the traditional jobs that are mainly performed by women. So my mission, as you asked me, and my kind of takeaway from this presentation is about really translating all these CEDAW principles that we're trying to deploy in physical world and around the cities, also in a digital world where are no borders and we can all meet there. And for me personally, when it comes to artists, I really believe that art has a very powerful mission, mainly because CEDAW and any human rights legislation are extremely formal, while art really touches on emotions and really touches on the personal stories and speaks to empathy and consciousness of people. So I think artists are very strong storytellers who are able to break down a very complex, sometimes human rights violations or issues and really present them to a public who may not know the concepts in a very digestible and very personal way. And I think this is why they are extremely important. And this is why we're inviting everyone to really contribute with their art to our virtual gallery, because these contributions have a huge impact, not only within your community, but as I said, digital world has no borders. These kind of works can really speak to people who live on the other side of the world and would like to learn about women's rights, CEDAW, and a culture of peace. And so I think I spoke now for about 3 minutes, and I would like to now invite my co-panelists at this session, and it is Pamela Morgan. I will start with you. Same to you, 2 questions that Jessica asked, and I will add 1 more question to you. And I would like to know if you can answer if there is any particular art form that is more powerful than the other when it comes to human rights, specifically women's rights advocacy, whether that is a painting, videos, or maybe even the new types of digital art that are out there. So our audience can know what is the art they could focus on when promoting women's rights. On to you.
Thank you, Michaela. And I appreciate the introduction to Jessica. It's really an honor and a privilege to be on this panel with so many passionate, committed activists. And I want to extend particular gratitude to Soon Young, the force behind the Cities for CEDAW movement. I'm a culture worker. For me, utilizing art and culture to advance gender equality supporting a culture of peace is as natural as breathing, and I'll explain. For 40 years, I was married to an activist musician who was immersed in the continuum of the Black arts movement, where art and culture were vehicles for political expression and often opposition, actions that were eventually to lead to peaceful, nonviolent lives for a historically oppressed people. This cultural activism has shaped how I see the world and how I approach my work. When I factor in my decades as an instructional technologist, the use of arts, culture, and media to advance a gender equality, including the host of events such as our International Women's Film Festival, is a natural outcome. And I do believe that film is the most powerful media of this century, of this decade. And I think that if we are really going to look at art as a vehicle to promote a culture of peace, we have to look at film and media and use it to its highest and best use. And I'm going to ask now a question of Elahi. So you have the two previous questions, and the question that I'm going to add to that is, what would be your advice to artists and aspiring artists globally on using the arts to support a culture of peace, to establish a campaign of peace that could possibly be implemented by Beijing+30? Elahi, I turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sun Young, for this wonderful program. As I was introduced, I'm Elahi Amani. I'm president of Women's Intercultural Network, which was this civil society partner of Cities for CEDAW. And I wanna welcome that three of our really movers and shakers are here. Gail James and Parisa Ijadi Maksudi and Mary Hansel, which gonna co-lead the Cities for CEDAW National Advisory Board. So to respond to this question, art and culture are powerful tools for promoting gender equality, playing, in my opinion, a pivotal role in challenging traditional gender roles, questioning societal norms, and reshaping established practices. Through artistic expression, gender norms are confronted, offering new perspective on identity and representation, and creating a space for more inclusive dialogues through art. I do painting and drawing, and so the two, I hold two exhibitions, art exhibition, one at Tehran University when I was a student, and at the time, because I do surrealism art, it was closed, it was silenced, and before the end of exhibition. And 20 years ago, we had a group art exhibition in Los Angeles, Wailing and Unveiling for Compulsory Hijab in Iran, and which was well received by the communities. So but also I believe that while women are well represented in art education, we remain underrepresented in leadership role within the cultural sector. So if there are a whole host of literature that how artists or the women artists are not part of the leadership of art community, so they can represent their art in terms of visual arts that I'm more closer watching that and following that. So addressing this imbalance of women in leadership of art community is vital challenge, vital in achieving gender equality and a kind of having a space for women representing their art. Additionally, I believe women artists often face economic disparity because they're not in the leadership of art. So art is a very powerful tool for not only peace, but social justice and gender equality, and creativity of women plays a very significant role in addressing disparities in economic, social, political. And so I want to leave it at that, and particularly emphasizing public art, which is the area that I'm very interested. Public art empower women to providing platforms for voices, stories, promoting gender equality in shared space. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for being our cultural advisors to the Cities for CEDAW campaign. And thank you for that dynamic discussion on how we can all contribute to a culture of peace and the importance of art and artists and promoting a culture of peace. So I'll now move on to introducing Sylvie Jacqueline Ndangmo, who is founder of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom Cameroon, which we are honored today to have as a co-sponsor of today's event.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jessica. And yeah, I know that I have 3 minutes, so I will make sure I go straight to the point. Thank you so much for inviting me, with Cameroon, and thank you so much to each and everyone, especially to Sun Yun, for steering the ship for this organization. How does building a culture of peace look like in Cameroon? I would like to take the example of with Cameroon as a case study, because if we are doing work in Cameroon, women's together, but I want to take this as a case study so that you have an idea. And some of the strategies that we use in Cameroon include public education through awareness raising, documentary film, advocacy, building synergies, coalition and partnership, publication. Economic empowerment of women is a key tool, engaging youth, engaging the media, mobilizing men and boys for feminist peace, supporting advocates on the ground, organizing solidarity visits, organizing inter-regional, inter-community, and regional cooperation, just to name a few. Since the time is very short, I just want to share 2 things. First, 1 or 2 things that my colleagues have been doing this week in Cameroon as part of International Peace Day, so that you have an idea, and also some key outstanding activity that we have carried some time ago. My colleagues in Cameroon, thanks to the leadership of Nathalie, who is connected to this call, have organized what we call Women's Call for Peace Week. It is the 3rd year that we are having this week-long activity as part of International Peace Day. What is the purpose of this Women's Call for Peace Week? It is a week where women take these activities to celebrate. You know, it's very important to celebrate our achievement, to celebrate the remarkable work that women are doing within their communities and make our demands louder than ever. It's important also to talk about the stories of their resilience so that they honor the impact and the spirit of the day and also inspire generations to come. After training the media, men and women on the women, peace and security agenda to support the peace work, and because media, men and women are a powerful tool in Cameroon, Cameroon started by training media women and men on the understanding of the women, peace and security agenda and the global agenda as whole regarding gender agenda. Then they launched these week-long activities through a march. It started with a march in a very remote village called Dom, and it was the march organized in partnership with the Ministry of Women's Empowerment and Family. I want to tell you that this is the ministry in charge of implementing the Women, Peace and Security agenda in Cameroon. So the Peace March, was co-organized with the support of this ministry, and then they went on to have this educative talk with more than 200 women on how to build a culture of peace, how to build social cohesion in the communities. Then they went also to have a specific training to enhance the economic empowerment of women. So they trained 65 women in that village on how to use menthol, and also soap, local soap. So this is a way for them to support the economic activities of women. Then they also organize a training yesterday, a football match in a school, what we call here in the US, soccer for peace. Yeah, so that
love it. Soccer for peace, great.
yes, it's very important because we organized earlier with the support of the United Nations Democratic Fund. We were able to train more than 200 teachers on how to promote social cohesion. So these teachers throughout this week have been tasked to organize activities in their different schools. You imagine 200 teachers organizing activities during the Peace Week. So one of the school organized this Soccer for Peace activities and also some role plays. And in the West region, just yesterday, if you watch our social page, our local branch in the West inaugurated a space, what we call youth peace space, equipped with a library, free internet, where youth could come and discuss how to fight hate speech, and also use the space to make their research. In the East region, they work with the internally the refugees from the Central African Republic. So they have some educative talk with this. And I already mentioned the training of teachers, which has a very multiplied effect, like all the teachers having activities in their school. So part of the project with UNDEF was also training what we call youth web influencers for peace. It's a very specific category of youth that use the social media to fight hate speech, to fight tribal speech, to fight violence, and to promote social cohesion. So these youth web influencers for peace have also used the opportunity of the Women's Call for Peace Week to do some activities. I'll just end by highlighting one of key activities that we have carried out in the past, which are worth mentioning. We contributed and supported the Cameroon government to have the National Action Plan, and then we also made a review to support the drafting of the second National Action Plan. We set up the first ever women's situation room with a call center, and the call center is helped to prevent, to get to know from the field what are the incidents that are likely to fuel violence in the field. So we are called in using the toll-free number, and we report to the competent authority. We have set up this and coordinate a legal and judicial clinics that provide an timely and appropriate and effective remedies to victims or survivors of violence. This in addition to the sensitization. Yeah, I know that time is running very short, but I'll just conclude here. Let me conclude to say that last year, our work resonated globally when we worked with NGO CSW to have this global rally in New York. So these are just a few activities among many others that we do on a daily basis with the objective to promote the culture of peace in Cameroon, in Africa, and in the world at large. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sylvie. I think we're going to close. My parting word is simply that we need this cultural revolution for peace. And we have the possibility in the next few months, because we're going to send you all an invitation to participate so that we can head towards this Beijing+30 with many, many contributions from everyone, all the way from writing poetry, doing art, to baking a peace cake, if that's what you want. Jessica, you want to say a few words before we have this smashing video, which is the, I'll explain what it is before we show it. The theme song that we used at the NGO Forum in 1995, written by Pat Humphreys, and we'll just show it. If you can stay for the whole thing, great. If not, we will also make sure that this is available on the YouTube. Jessica, closing words?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you again to all of our speakers and culture makers who contributed to our event today, and our co-sponsors. So let's play the song.
All right, here we go. Here's Pat.
Gonna keep on moving forward.
You know the song, sing it.
Keep on moving forward. keep on moving forward, never turning back, never turning back. Sigamos adelante, siempre adelante, siempre adelante, sin volver atrás, sin volver atrás. Gonna keep on loving boldly, keep on loving boldly, keep on loving boldly, never turning back, never turning back. Amaremos con pasión, siempre con pasión, siempre con pasión, sin volver atrás, sin volver atrás. Gonna reach across our borders, reach across our borders, reach across our borders, never turning back, never turning back.
The music is still with us. Our panelists, turn on your video so we can see you. Where are you? Mateo did all the design. Mateo, we want to see your face. Maureen helped us. She was on our team. Come on, turn on your video. And we'll say goodbye. Gonna reunite family. Reunite family.
Thanks, Jessica, for coordinating everything.